Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Game Over Winnipeg. My name is Brady. I am joined here tonight with my good buddy Connor Hrabchak on a night.
What, like?
Where do we even start? On a
Man.
night where the Winnipeg Jets lose 3-0 to the San Jose Sharks, one of the worst teams in the league. They do outshoot the Sharks, but unfortunately, that doesn't really matter if you don't score any goals. First off, as I said before, I'm joined here by Connor. Connor, how are you doing here tonight?
I'm great. I'm doing well, even though that Jets game was quite possibly the worst one of the year, arguably.
I feel like we say that every
the time of
game.
the season. I know. It's becoming like tiresome to say that, but no, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. I've done this once before with Liz, and it was a blast. So I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Well, thank you for staying up to the wee hours
Yeah.
of the morning to go over this. If as you know, as you said, he's been on here with us before, but you can find Connor on Twitter at Connor Hrabchak1. He does some writing covering the Manitoba Moose. So if you're interested in the prospects and stuff that the Jets got going on, it's a good place to get some good insight. And of course, he's on the Level Flight podcast as well too with Brian, who he had on a couple episodes ago. All right, well, you know what? Let's just dive into it. Let's just
Let's
you
do
know,
it.
there's
Let's
no
do it.
other way to do it.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
I think a good place to start here is were the Jets goalie tonight. They had 40 plus shots. Brendan Dillon at the break even mentioned that they're gonna have to work hard to get one past Reimer, so they remember the last time that they played the Sharks. I'm just curious, in your opinion, was this James Reimer's doing, or did the Jets maybe not create as much as they were hoping to?
I am of the mindset that they did get goalied to an extent. Probably not the worst that they've been goalied this year. But then again, there are so many, like, there's such a long list of things that the Jets did wrong, like deployment wise, just playing wise, whatever you want to talk about that, I'm sure we'll get into, that you can't even, like, being goalied isn't even like top three on the list of like things or like reasons they lost. Like, yeah, they did get goalied to an extent. I haven't looked at like Money Puck or Natural Stat Trick, but I'm sure Reimer saved like a million goals above expected.
It
But
was something like
still,
three, or I think it was three. No, I guess because they didn't get score any goals. The
right.
goals, the expected goals the Jets created was 4.4 uh, goals above expected.
See, like that leads me to believe like they got goalied. But then again, you're watching the game and it's just like you see Wheeler, who's getting played double the amount that Ehlers is getting played. You see the line combinations. You see the classic bonus panic blender at the start of the third period, and it's just like, yeah, James Reimer played great. That one save on Appleton was ridiculous, but there are so many other things. Do you think they got goalied?
Like, I mean, I think I agree with your assessment of to a certain extent, yeah, because like I mean, you look at the paddle save that Reimer made on Mason Appleton, and you go like what else can you really ask for? But then I also look and I think about it and I go, the top six was pretty what's the word, like pedestrian tonight. Like it just seemed like
Yeah.
that no one really had it in the top six. I'm sure we'll talk about Mark Scheifele. I'm sure we'll talk about Blake Wheeler and his deployment. But and obviously the lines and everything. But just in general, like I am now looking at Natural Stat Trick, and the
Okay.
top four players who are on the for the amount of expected goals they created are
Mhm.
Adam Lowry, Vlad Nemeskov, who I guess was in the top six, Morgan Barron, who's a bottom four or a bottom line player, like, and he played what 8 minutes and 57 seconds tonight. Like, I don't know. I don't even know what to say. And when it comes to all this, like the Jets just despite not being able to create anything, also the turnovers that they had tonight, like it just felt like at any point the Sharks could have pounced and gotten even more goals. Obviously Hellbuck played decently well. I don't think that tonight's was anything of his fault. Obviously you got to score a goal to win.
Right.
But yeah, and you know what? I think the first place we have to start is just because we have to start here. Sorry, I'm fumbling over my words. Had too much sugar to try and keep myself awake.
Fair.
Let's just start off with Nikolai Ehlers. I mean, the other day we get the we get the note that Rick Bowness has switched up the lines. Instead of playing with Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, he gets dropped down into the bottom 9 to play with Appleton and Lowry. Bowness said it wasn't anything of it. He didn't see it as a demotion, but rather, he wanted Ehlers to still play his game and maximize what they get out of his minutes. I'm just curious what your first initial reaction was to that, and then also, I guess, in play tonight, how do you think that line did tonight?
I thought Ehlers individually played quite well. Like it wasn't anything spectacular, but it wasn't anything worse than what we've seen over the last 2 weeks from him. He's kind of developed a consistent game over the last 2 weeks, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
He had been up and down coming off the injury, but I think he's really established himself. And he played 13 minutes and 50 seconds in this one. The quote to me, I don't have it available. But the quote that Bonus, the reasoning he was demoting Ehlers, being like he turns the puck over too much and we want him to have the puck on his stick more often and stuff like that. All of that stuff, just you could say about any top 6 player. You could say that about Mark Scheifele. You could say that about Blake Wheeler. And the whole thing about Ehlers having the puck on his stick more often would be more true if you put him with a guy like Nino, who creates space with his physicality, and then you let Ehlers kind of just skate around and do his thing. Playing with 2 checking forwards that don't really create much off the rush. Having said that, you said Adam Lowry created a bunch of expected goals in this game, but those guys don't typically generate off the rush, and I just don't understand. And I see people in the chat, Brian, saying they're actively avoiding going back to the Connor Dubois Ehlers line. The fact that line has not been put back together is just mind-boggling, because they can't score. The TSN broadcast kept saying they haven't scored 3 or more goals in 6 or 7 games, and then you get shut out by James Reimer.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I don't like it at all. But I thought Ehlers played well. I thought he played well, despite being on the third line.
I definitely agree with the assessment of Ehlers on that line. I did think he had a pretty good game, and here's the thing, because I obviously we're both in the same boat as we are Nikolai Ehlers truthers. The philosophy of taking someone in the top 6 and dropping them down into the bottom 6 to try and get some more scoring and some more depth is totally fine to me. And the same thing with vice versa, putting Vlad Nemestikov up in that top 6 totally makes a lot of sense to me. But it only makes sense in my brain is if you're putting Vlad Nemestikov up with Nikolai Ehlers and playing those guys together. We saw what they were creating, and we talked about that line when it was Wheeler, Ehlers, and Nemesnikov, and it feels like Bonus looked at that line and saw that Nemesnikov was helping Wheeler rather than helping Ehlers. I don't understand how he came to that conclusion, and especially going back to what Brian said in the chat, what you were saying there about actively avoiding going back to that Connor Dubois Ehlers line. I'm speechless. I don't know what to say as to the entire geez, I can't even form a thought right now. Good grief.
No, it's so hard to articulate what they're thinking. So I don't even blame you. I don't even blame you.
When you get Kevin Sawyer on the broadcast now, saying how Mark Scheifele hasn't even been shooting, let alone scoring. Blake Wheeler hasn't scored in how many games now, and the guy who's getting the demotion is Nick Ehlers, again playing 14 minutes a night. What's the deal here? What's going on? And I understand that Nick Ehlers is a very special player in the sense of I can at least understand why maybe a coach might try to do some mental gymnastics to figure out for a reason why he would be put down on that third line. He's a tough guy to find players who work well with him, who are in sync with him. But you found it before. You found the line of Connor Dubois Ehlers. You found Nemestikov with him. And Ehlers is constantly getting the short end of the stick. I just don't understand it. And that this kind of moves me on to Mark Scheifele, where tonight, like every single game that we watch of him, it just feels like he's more and more disengaged. All right, would you agree with me in that sentiment?
Yeah. I want to ask you and people in the chat if they got the like infamous Pierre-Luc Dubois, like the shift that got him basically traded out of Columbus, which I didn't even think was that like really that bad at the time. I think that was a little bit overblown. He just was like away from the play and just looked disinterested. But the turnover that he had leading to the goal, they had like an ISO cam on him.
Oh,
TSN did, and he just is like floating, and then the puck comes to him in the middle, and then he loses it, and then he's just floating, and he loses his guy, and then the puck ends up in the back of the net. And I'm like, that gives me pretty big like the shift vibes. He like doesn't even like bend his knees really, and just it ends up in the back of the net, and he was the one that turned it over the blue line. I don't know. It's even more concerning when you're not getting the offense from him because you haven't really got the defense from like Mark Scheifele's never really been a 200-foot guy. But then again, when he's not even getting shots on net, like let alone assists, secondary assists, he's getting like power play points, whatever. If he's getting Mickey Mouse stats, but he's not even shooting on the net. That's like the biggest thing. It's ridiculous.
yeah, and I wanna highlight Kishore in the chat here saying we've had 4 years of that shift with Scheifele.
Yes. No.
Like
When the Dubois the shift thing happened, there's so many people on Jets Twitter saying like if you just watch one Jets game, Scheifele does this like 4 times a game. It's like, yeah, it's true to an extent. Like, and it's even more magnified when, let alone he's not scoring, the whole team's not scoring. Right? It just looks that much worse.
absolutely, and with him, it's just like I feel like we're at a crossroads here this offseason. Like, we can talk playoffs, and I'm sure we'll get into the fact that Calgary won tonight and Nashville won tonight and what this means for the playoffs when the Jets can't even beat the James Reimer and the Sharks. But like going back to Scheifele, like ever since the trade deadline, I have this personal belief that I think that Scheifele is pissed off with the lack of moves that the Jets made at the trade deadline. And then right after that all happens, you then get the benching in Carolina. And since then, it just feels like he has completely sold the season. Like he does not care if they make playoffs or not. In my mind, it almost feels like he's like, the sooner you get me off this team, the better. And it's really sad because not only is he someone who we've wanted to lean on, we've tried to make him into, this guy who we can depend on. And at the start of the season, everyone was celebrating him. Like everyone was talking about how much different of a player he seemed this year under a different coach. And fast forward to, 4 or 5 months later, here we are again. So you know what? I feel like I need to ask this right now because there were some some rumblings, some shakes. Elliot Friedman had his mouth, flapping wide on his podcast, and he said something along the lines of he can sense a big shakeup coming for the Jets in this offseason. Again, we can talk playoffs, but I think that right now the bigger picture is past playoffs because I think we're probably both in agreement that it's not going to go on for long, even if we make it there. Yeah. How do you feel about the offseason potentially coming up here with the Jets? All the Dubois stuff, Scheifele, Hellebuck, Wheeler, all these guys. Do you feel like the Jets are going to make a big change, or do you feel like they're going to stick to it one more year and ride this thing out into the sunset?
I would like to think that they're going to blow it up because I think that this is what that's what I would do if I was Kevin Cheveldayoff. I would not try and run it back. But I said this at the tail end of a shameless plug, the latest Level Flight episode. But I said at the end, like the Nino deal and the Rick Bowness contract make me think that they're running it back because the Nino contract obviously doesn't finish this year. It finishes after next season. And when they signed Rick Bowness, that was a 2-year deal. I'm pretty sure there's a club option for 3. but that it has 2 years for sure, and
Mhm.
that's again Hellebuck. Everyone's up after that year. I think they run it back, and then they won't maximize their returns because they won't be in a playoff position, or maybe they will at the deadline, and it'll be like I don't even know. Like that's honestly looking too far ahead. But if they're like bad next year, then they'll try and trade them at the deadline, and they won't get as much as of a return, right? I think they should maximize in the offseason right now. The Dubois thing is so complex to me because obviously he wants to go to Montreal, and everyone knows that. Like Montreal knows that.
Mhm.
Winnipeg knows that. It seems like league wide people know that. But then again, like you could just have a random team come out of nowhere and wow the Jets. Because they want to contend and they want Pierre-Luc Dubois, and they'll just make a better offer simply. And then maybe Montreal signs him after. But I think they should trade everyone, but I think they run it back.
Yeah, I personally
Bryce.
am of the mind that they're gonna half run it back. I think
Okay.
I have a feeling. I don't know. It's just there's something internal with me right now. I just have this feeling that Mark Scheifele is not on this hockey team come next season.
Yeah.
I think that the Jets actually tried to move him this offseason. Remember how Drager coming out with all that info, just basically saying like he does not expect Mark Scheifele to return. I think what happened this offseason though is that the Jets ended up trying to trade Scheifele for another version of Scheifele, like a player who is a roster player, kind of similar in age. Um, and now I actually just had the thought right now. I wonder if they, look at some sort of like Evgeny Kuznetsov thing, because that to me screams the
Mhm.
Jets of, hey, we have a problem, you guys have a problem, let's both not solve it by giving each other's problems. Um,
Right.
but I would expect the Jets to try and run it back next year, but slightly tinkered and slightly altered. And I completely agree with you that that this offseason is when you're going to get the most value. If you can get some sort of sign and trade with like Connor Hellebuck, I think that is the signal of we're actually taking a step back here. But I don't know. It's it's a scary time to be a Jets fan, but it's also very
Yeah.
interesting with all the potential moves that could be made this offseason. But we are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Tonight, the the Jets ended up losing, as we said, to the Sharks,
Yeah.
and the Calgary Flames won their game. The Nashville Predators also won their game. Right now, it feels like the Jets are kind of in free fall, but the teams behind them are also not great either. I'm just curious on your opinion of will the Jets make playoffs? Do you think that they should be worried about making playoffs? How do you feel about Nashville or Calgary potentially storming up the rear and taking them over?
Now, I've never really taken Nashville seriously just because if you go look at their team, they are like that team making the playoffs would be hilarious because it's the ultimate like goaltender is just carrying them. I think their bottom six is just full of AHLers. They traded away everyone at the deadline. If UC Saros somehow carries them into a playoff round, that would be magnificent and hilarious. But I think it's Calgary for me. That's the number one team, or the obviously the one of the two that I think is the biggest threat to the Jets. And obviously they have that big game coming up Wednesday, April 5th. But the Jets, we've been saying this for weeks now, but they're in control of their own destiny, and especially so because their schedule is not that terrible down the stretch. Like they come home for 5 games here. They get the Red Wings, Devils, Flames, Preds, Sharks. So you can basically chalk up the Sharks as a loss, apparently, because they just can't beat the Sharks. Um, but the Red Wings, again, a team on the outside looking in, they're not making the playoffs, right? The Devils are a really good team. The Flames, that's like the biggest game of the year. They get the Flames and the Preds back to back on the Wednesday and the Saturday, so that will literally decide their season. Uh, but that those 2 games are huge. Obviously, I think they lose. It would be so funny. It would be so Jets if they beat Calgary and Nashville and then lose to San Jose, and then Calgary and Nashville like win their
Yeah.
games and make up the ground anyways. So I could see something like that happening where they lose to Detroit, but they beat New Jersey, and then they beat Calgary, but then they lose to San Jose because that's just what the Jets do. They win when you don't think they will, and then they lose when you think they're obviously going to win because the Sharks have lost 9 straight, right? So obviously they're going to win. No, but yeah,
hmm Oh, that would be very Jets.
It would be so
I
Jets.
simultaneously would hate to see it, but I would also love to see it because it would be really entertaining and yeah. But I also want the Jets to make playoffs because it is fun doing these shows, and it would be a lot more
Right.
fun doing it in whiteout gear. But alas, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. In the meantime, though, uh, things are not going well for the Jets right now, and uh, I'm just curious. What do you think could potentially be some sort of solve for this right now? Is if you were Rick Bonus right now, what can even happen? Like, what can we do? Can we take any sort of feel good out of the fact that the Jets were able to get 45 shots here tonight? Can we do moral victories mean anything? Not that I think tonight was a moral victory, but let's just say against Nashville, or let's leave the Calgary game because I agree with you that I think Calgary is much more of the threat. Let's just say against Nashville or even the Devils or whoever, they play well but they lose. Do you think that moral victories are worth anything at this point of the year when they're chasing points, but also the Jets should make playoffs based on how everything is right now? Sorry. So my question is, my bad. I'm all over the
All
place
good.
tonight. And my question is, do moral victories mean anything? And also, where do we even start to fix this team and get them playoff ready?
I think I'm of the mindset that moral victories mean something in like game 32 when you're building who you are as a team. And if you go into San Jose and you get goalied, you get goalied. But at this time of the year, you cannot take moral victories, especially with the way that the Jets are playing and where they sit in the standings. Now, shooting talent has been a thing that the Jets have shot above expectation for years. When in 2019, when you have Patrick Laine on your team, you're going to shoot above expectation. But they always used to be like a net positive team where they would generate a certain amount, but they would score more than they're supposed to based on the shots that they're generating, right? Um, but this year they're way below that. I think I saw something on Twitter the other day where they're like eighth in expected goals for, but 22nd in shooting percentage or goals or whatever. So there's a big discrepancy there. And when you get goalied by Joel Hofer, James Reimer, like I don't know, these goalies that are like barely backups, and you get goalied by them, I don't think that's a coincidence over and over again. So it's encouraging to see like they didn't just roll over, and it would have been a lot more concerning if they lost 3-0 and gave up 45 shots. But then again, you need to find a way to win because this is getting ridiculous. You're getting goalied by backup goalies, and you can't score goals. You can't take moral victories. I don't know how they get out of the shooting funk. I would obviously start with putting Connor Dubois Ehlers back together. I've been very vocal of that just because that line was one of the best lines in the league when they were together. You have Nina Ryder now who could play with Scheifele. Nemestikov has been a solid addition. There are ways to generate offense through deployment. And one thing I do want to say is this team is not good enough to overcome both Rick Bonus and their opponents. So the Devils coming up, you can't beat the Devils if you're not deployed exactly how you're supposed to be. Because if you're already taking a step back, the Devils are good enough, they're just going to kill you, right? The Flames as well. If you go into that game with a suboptimal lineup, you're starting a step behind. And in a game like that, yeah, you might outplay them. But say Jacob Markstrom has his best game of the year and then you lose in regulation, you gotta Bonus has to get back to what worked. And that is where they have to start. Because they're playing well right now. They just aren't being deployed properly.
I agree on a good chunk of it. The only thing I will say, just to loop back around, I'm sorry, I gave you a very wide open question for a lot. I asked like four things in one.
Oh, okay.
I actually think that to a certain extent, it depends on the game. I think that there is something that can be said for a moral victory at this point of the year, and my only reasoning for that, and I completely get why anyone would go, what do you even mean? at some point the Jets need to start playing well. If they are going to make playoffs, I mean, obviously, very, very obviously, results are the thing that is the most important thing, in my opinion, obviously. They have to make playoffs and this and that. But at the same time, I still think they should likely make playoffs. So, I would be happy if, the Jets lost against the Devils. And let's just say by that point, we know that they're probably, hopefully going to be in. Or at least, it's still looking very likely. I'd still be happy if the Jets show up and play well, because at the end of the day, like, I do want the Jets to do well in the play. I mean, obviously you do too. But
Right.
if they just fall backwards down the stairs into the playoffs, it's just going to be a 4-0, sweep and it's over, right? I would like to potentially, win a couple games in playoffs, which at this point I'm not confident that they will at all. And I'm not saying that you think that or anything like that, but
Right.
but going back to the lineup and everything like that, I think that I would also start by putting Dubois, Ehlers, and Connor back together. I would really love to see some sort of, even if it's just for a couple shifts here and there during the game, I would love to see some sort of promotion for Morgan Bear. And I think that he's been playing fantastic over the past, since the Jets began to slide since the All-Star break. He's at least shown that he cares. And it's crazy that we even have to talk about the fact that, that he cares, and that's a good thing. But, at this point, and I think that's also why it's so frustrating as Jets fans too. Like, this team should be capable of more. But again, Rick Bowness deploying suboptimal lineups, players who, don't really care to give, as much effort as they can. And that's kind of how we get to here today. So going back to lineups, again, I'm all over the place. I apologize. I would put together that top line again, but I also would experiment with some sort of, running the three scoring lines. And I would love to do something where maybe you do, like if you do have to take that line apart to, get some more depth, do something along the lines of like Ehlers, Scheifele, and Nemesnikov, Connor, Dubois, Nino. Although I think Nino might be actually better served with Scheifele, because I think Scheifele really needs someone who can work his ass off and get the puck to him, because he certainly won't. And then, in the cases where you do need a goal, then you can put together that top line again, halfway through the game. And then that's when you can really go chasing offense. But alas, that is just us sitting here complaining, whining,
Right.
asking
Exactly.
why is this the way that it is? We are running out of time on Zoom though, shortly. Let me just see here. What else? I lost my track of thought. I don't know what I was going to ask you. Oh, you know what? I will say this. I completely forgot to say this at the start, but I would not have guessed that the Jets were going to lose tonight, even though the Sharks apparently have their number. But hey, if you do want to bet, it's March Mania at Sports
There you
Interaction. I'm sorry, Connor.
There you go. There you
NHL,
go.
NBA, March Madness, MLB, and so much more. It's bananas. That's in the script. I have to say it. I'm sorry. Play Pinata Picks and Minute Madness, exclusive games with insane odds you can't play anywhere else. Make your next bet with Sports Interaction. Download the app in Ontario or using the QR code at the bottom of the screen, or head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to get started. 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Please do. If not, there are always resources in the description. Please do consult that. All right, I'm gonna hop over to the chat here and see if anyone have any questions here. MGD8862 says, "What will the Jets get for Scheifele trading him in the offseason?" Connor, I'll let you take that away. Is there anything in particular, any sort of package, even just philosophy generally, what would you be looking for in a Scheifele trade? And also maybe, if the Jets do take a step back, why don't you give us a little insight into maybe some Manitoba Moose players that could be of use in the future?
Well, newly signed Parker Ford scored tonight, so he might.
Hey.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm not gonna bring his name up. He literally joined the organization today.
Mm-hmm.
But Scheifele, we talked again, level flights coming up, but we talked on our latest episode of if the Jets blew it up, what would the returns look like for all these players? And we kind of settled that obviously for Scheifele, Hellebuck, Dubois, it starts with a first round pick and then you build off of that. So Scheifele would start with a 1, and then depending on when they're trading him, because like I said, I don't know if they're going to blow it up in the offseason or they're going to wait. They're going to run it back and wait in the deadline. But maybe if they go to the deadline, then it's a 1. It looks like the Bo Horvat trade. But if they do it in the offseason, maybe they can have more bidders. They can maximize those assets. But like a B plus prospect plus a 1 plus, maybe that's all. Maybe B plus and a 1, maybe B and a 1. Or they make a hockey trade because Chevy seems to love those, and they get a player like Evgeny Kuznetsov, like you said, like another top 6 center in return. But I think if they're trading Scheifele, they're blowing it up, and that would mean a first round pick has to be involved. And then I would think something else. I would hope something else, but I don't know what Scheifele's value is. Especially when I don't know if he's already 30 or if he's turning 30, but he's getting into the later stages of his career. He's going to need a new contract. I don't know what his market value is, but I think it starts with a 1 for sure.
I definitely agree with that there, and I think the more interesting thing is what team would even be interested in a Mark Scheifele? Because like you look around, and I'm sure that it is a negative to his value that teams can look and go, I think that this guy might be part of the problem in Winnipeg, and they might want to go, okay, maybe we'll stay away from him. We don't want him to infect our locker room. Kishore also says he is 30, so he is on the wrong side of 30, unfortunately. But list starts with a 1. But going back to that, like I wonder if a team like a young team would be interested in him to try and kind of elevate their team in kind of like an Artemi Panarin kind of way to kind of accelerate a rebuild. I wonder if a team like, and this is for either Dubois or Scheifele, I wonder if a team like Boston would be interested in that, just due to the fact that Krejci and Bergeron at some point have to retire and walk away, right? And maybe they look at Scheifele and go, hey, this is a guy that we can actually impose our culture on him rather than vice versa. But as Kishore says in the chat here, 37 is the player that has the most value. I completely agree, and I just salivate. I just salivate at the thought of like, if you can get Hellebuck to sign some sort of extension with a trade, like what does that value look like? I like if you approach a team like an Edmonton or like I don't know. I'm trying to think of what teams
LA.
like LA. If you go up to any of those teams,
Detroit.
like Detroit, man, the value you could get, because like if you're in Edmonton's shoes, if you're in LA's shoes, like I'm giving up like who? I'm just trying to think of who would be prospects on either of those teams. I guess on Edmonton you have like Xavier Bourgault, Dylan Holloway, all these guys. I think that those guys could be very interesting in a Hellebuck trade, because I'm sure that they would be interested in him. But returning back to you, I do want to press you a little bit. What have you seen this year from some of the guys on the Moose there? Is there any standout that could potentially make an impact either next year, the year after, or guys who might be taking longer but you're pretty confident that they'll make it there? Would love your insight on the Manitoba Moose.
Is this a Ville Heinola question?
It's not specifically a Ville Heinola question.
Yeah.
It's a question that about the team he plays for, but
fair enough.
It actually wasn't, to be honest, but
okay.
But
I was just wondering, because most people, when they ask about the Moose, they just want to know about Ville, because that's like the number one prospect on the team, really. But no, he's been better than he was last year. Like he's made more strides. Again, I've stood on the side where I just don't really know what like the defense core is jammed, right? Like Sandberg's there now. Do you want him playing 7th D, or do you want him playing in the Moose? This is probably the best spot for him right now. But then again, he's dominating the minutes that he's given, right? So there's that on the back end. Declan Chisholm just got hurt. Leon Gavanka, he hasn't really, like, he's kind of been the same player for the last 2 years here. There might not be an NHL future for him. But again, both Chisholm and Gavanka, I believe, are no longer waivers eligible after this year. So either they're going to be in the NHL or they're going to be somewhere else, or in the AHL, but they can't move them up and down kind of thing, right? In terms of up front, I sit with Dave Minuk of Illegal Curve every game. He really likes Henry Nikkanen, fourth rounder in 2019. He's made some big strides. Him and Daniel Torgerson, when they use their size, are very, very effective AHL players. If that can translate into the NHL, that would be huge for the Jets' bottom six, of course. And then obviously, like, Jansen Harkins is lighting it up. Tonight he moved to 41 points in 36 games with the Moose, which is by far the highest point per game on the team. Dominic Toninato, again, all situations player, penalty kill, power play. He's lighting it up as well. And then the rest are just kind of either AHL guys that have been there and are still playing well, like Alex Limoges and Jeff Malott, or they're still young prospects that haven't really taken that leap yet. But I think Jansen Harkins, every time I post a video of him scoring a goal, as he does, like, seemingly every game, people are wondering why he's not in the Jets bottom six, especially when they're having so many issues scoring. And I agree, like, maybe Jansen Harkins could get called up, and maybe a guy like Saku Maenalainen, who, yeah, his game isn't to score, but you need scoring right now, so maybe you could do that. But to answer the part of your question that was like in the near future, again, I think it's still Ville Heinola for like 3 years running now is the guy.
We'll always be on his side, even when he turns 30 and he's still in the AHL. Or he's playing for some NHL team, some other NHL team lighting it up. I would love to continue this conversation. I would love to talk more Jets and more Moose with you, but unfortunately our Zoom is about to run out. So
less than a minute.
So thank you all. Thank you all for tuning in. We got a great turnout for, considering it's almost 1 a.m. Connor, thank you also again for staying up, joining me here tonight. It was a lot of fun. Make sure you do check out Connor's work. He's over on Twitter, of course, at Connor Hrabchak 1. He's doing stuff for the Hockey Writer. He's writing there for the Jets and Senators. Obviously, the Level Flight podcast. Is it Level Flight podcast, right? Yeah,
Level Flight podcast at Level Flight WPG.
Perfect. Thank you. And please do go check it out. As he was saying today, they've had many conversations about a lot of the stuff we're pondering today. So go check it out. Anyways, thank you all for tuning in. I think I'm probably going to lose you immediately. So thank you again, Connor.
Thank you.
That was great. There he goes. Well, again, thank you all for tuning in. Please do like the stream. Again, really appreciate you guys all sticking with me here tonight. The Jets have a couple more games coming up. There's 7 more games left on the schedule. Again, appreciate you all for coming out. Follow Connor on Twitter. Follow myself at NHL Chunky. Follow at STPN Sports. Follow Liz Hood. Have yourselves a wonderful, it's already Wednesday, so enjoy. Happy Wednesday, my dudes. And have a good rest of your week. Thank you all for tuning in.
Game over! Powered by Sports Interaction.